Health and Environment, the Division of Environment. We're going to go ahead and get started on working the first budget we heard, which is the Kansas State Fair. So if you have the ability to listen and read two different things at the same time, I decided to give you that heads up. But we will start by taking a look at the Kansas Department of Environment and Health and Environment, the Division of Environment, with an overview from our fiscal analyst, Mr. Drury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Luke Drury, and I'm sure by now, Senior Fiscal Analyst with Legislative Research, I'm sure by now members of the committee are tired of hearing my voice. This is the last presentation that you all will hear from me from agency budgets. Before I get started on the Division of Environment, I do just want to follow up briefly. Vice Chair Alley had asked a couple of questions, and the Chair, Peck, had asked a couple of questions regarding KDWP that I needed to follow up upon. The one FTE position that was included as an increase in Wildlife and Parks' budget was submitted in error, according to the agency. That should not have been included. And then the vacancy rate, or excuse me, the filled position rate as of when the budgets were submitted for KDWP was 92%. So of the total positions that they had available, 92% of them were filled. So again, for members of the committee, you do have, and I do again apologize for the sheer volume of papers that you all have, but you do have the Budget Committee report, the budget summary, the shorthand items, and then the performance-based budgeting. For the purposes of this presentation, I will be going over the Budget Committee report, and this has your KLRD analyst up at the top, KLRD summary, volume number, page number, and bill number with two tables on the front page. That's what I'll be speaking from. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, if you flip over to page 2, that's where I will begin the conversation. The agency's request is 108 million, including 19.2 million from the general fund. That also includes 406.3 FTE positions. I would note that that is a 350% increase above the approved number, and that is related to an agency enhancement request. The agency enhancement request is for $350,000. That was deleted by the LBC, and that was later put back in by the House and is in the House position. $350,000 for the Hazardous Waste Stabilization Fund. The agency notes that traditionally this fund and program has been funded with fees and federal funds. However, fee revenues have decreased for a number of years, as well as federal funding for the initiative has decreased for a number of years. They do plan to increase fees to make the fund more self-sufficient and stable moving forward, but they do indicate there are immediate shortfall needs for the current fiscal year, and this will also carry over into the next year. The House did go ahead and increase or adopt that position. They also added back 8.1 FTE positions that were deleted by the LBC, and the Budget Committee there notes that these, again, similar to the items with the Department of Agriculture, these are positions that are funded, and they are adding the statistic back. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions for 25, or I can move forward into 26.
Committee questions on fiscal year 25? Okay, you said that they said the fees have not been meeting the need, but they haven't raised the fees, but they're going to raise the fees. Okay, why haven't they? And if you don't know, we can let the agency speak for themselves. But
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure where in the process that is to increase those fees. That would need to go through the Joint Committee and Rules and Regs, but I don't know where that process is or if the agency has started that process to date, so I would defer to the agency.
Okay, and this committee, you heard Mr. Drury say that federal funds are being reduced, and so another case, oh, well, the state, you kick that money in. As chair, I'm getting tired of that, and that's not anything against you, Mr. Drury, or the committee, but we are constantly being expected to backfill where the federal government is backing out, which the federal government can do what they want to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean the state needs to fill in the, quote, gap, end quote. Just a little bit of comment from the chair. Mr. Drury, there are no questions. You can move into fiscal year 2026.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That is on page number 3. The agency's request is $84.8 million. That includes $3.4 million general fund. You may notice straight away that that number is much less or less than what was in 25, and that is because you will also see that that's a decrease of $15.2 million from the general fund, and that is because there were some one-time monies that was appropriated to the Division of Environment in the previous legislative session. That would include some monies for small town infrastructure. That was $16 million general fund. That went to drinking water and sewer upgrades for towns with populations less than 1,000. There was also $210,000 for livestock waste management. Those were both indicated at that time as being one-time expenditures and are not included in the agency's base request. However, you will notice that first bullet point there on page number 3 is $210,000 enhancement request for livestock waste management. The agency has since requested that that item become a part of the base moving forward. That money was previously appropriated to assist the Livestock Waste Management Bureau or Division to assist with being able to hire contract engineers to review proposed plans for confined animal feeding operations, CAFOs. Also, some clerical staff is what they are using that monies for, so contracting staffs. Item number 2 there is that hazardous waste stabilization fund. We discussed that previously. They include that again here in 2026. My understanding of that item, as well as the KEEMS database implementation, $425,000 general fund, is to indicate being one time. That would mean to say that when you all come back for next year and we have a conversation about the FY 2027 budget, you will see reductions in those from those of that amount from the base. Those are intended to be one-time spends. Mr. Chair, I would note that the LBC deleted all of those enhancement requests as well as 8.1 FTE positions. The House, excuse me, the House since did put those enhancement requests back in, as well as the 8.1 FTE positions, also noting that those FTEs, and this is on page 4, noting that those FTEs are funded positions. I would note, though, for that KEEMS database system, this is monies essentially to assist with a couple of different phases that would include integrating integrating the KEEMS system with other systems that would also include some items regarding to federal e-reporting requirements. So that is there. And then I would also note, Mr. Chair, as is similar with the other water agencies that you all have heard in this committee, the House did also add an additional $2 million to the State Water Plan Fund. This is one of those agencies, though, that when it made it to House appropriations, did not see a reduction in that add. That $2 million that was added to by the Budget Committee was retained by the Committee on Appropriations. And similar to those other agencies, those traditional lines of appropriation were reinstated and those 5 buckets were done away with. Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions on 2026, or I do know too that we have Leo Henning and Kate Gleason with the Division of Environment who may be able to speak to some more of the policy related items. Technical number items I can certainly be of assistance with.
Any questions of Mr. Drury regarding fiscal year 2026? Do you need to turn that blind so you don't have sun in your face, or are you okay?
I'm okay for right now, Mr. Chair, but thank you.
Okay. The livestock waste management, that's not also done by KDA? Are they involved in livestock waste management?
Mr. Chair, this is related to confined animal feeding operations, and that includes an environmental aspect of it in regard to animal waste product and the maximum daily loads on there. So that's more of a that's more of a Division of Environment item. I can't speak to off the top of my head what sort of environmental items that the Department of Agriculture are involved in with confined animal feeding operations, but this is more related to those again, those environmental impacts.
Okay. And so I'm still, maybe I'll struggle the rest of my life to follow all of the water plan funds, but if I remember correctly, we had been told that the House had over-appropriated the State Water Plan Fund, and this is part of that over-appropriation, correct? I mean, every time we see state water plan money spent, it all goes into that pot of overspending? Am I summarizing that correctly?
Mr. Chair, you are correct that as it currently stands in House Bill 2007, the State Water Plan Fund is estimated to be over-appropriated in fiscal year 2026.
So every time that there is an appropriation from the state water plan, as we see here, that's money that's either not sufficiently funded or overspending. I'm not sure what words to use, but so something needs to be done. Otherwise, there's not going, when we see all these programs from state water plan funds, there's not enough money to go around currently. So we're either going to have to cut some programs or find funding somewhere else. And I'm not really saying that, Mr. Drury, for your benefit so much as for the committee, that there's some things we're going to have to figure out as it relates to water plans. Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is around the $425,000 for the integration of KIMES with preceptive content. Is that $425,000? Can you explain that? Is that are we contracting a third party to do that integration? Can that work? Can it not be done in-house, or where are we spending that $425,000 at?
Mr. Chair, Senator, there is some more information regarding this item in the budget summary document. So it's a little bit more of the more detailed document. If you flip over to, I have this on page 17 of my document. I'm hoping that those page numbers are the same for you all. That's item number 3 there is the KEAMS database implementation. This is some additional information. You are correct, Senator, that this is a 2-phase item, including about 300 hours of contracted hours. And again, there's some more information there, but the agency does indicate it is a rather manual process.
Additional questions? Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I think you kind of said this in passing. I'm not sure. Last year, I think they had like 16 million to help the small little towns and whatever, and about 100 million, or what was an unbelievable amount that came in. Are they planning on doing something like that again this year? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Senator, to my knowledge, as you indicated, you are correct that the amount of requests that came in, and sometimes, admittedly, it's a bit difficult for me to remember that not only does KDHE have some money in there for small town infrastructure they did, the Water Office also through their Technical Assistance and Grants Fund. So it can get a little bit confusing with the different programs and monies that are out there, but insofar as it relates to the Division of Environment, those were indicated to be one-time expenditures, and then they are. To my knowledge, though, again, you are correct in stating that those requests came in far higher than what was available. But those monies have since or will be spent in 2025.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see the agency had $5.6 million in unspent state water plan funds in fiscal year 25. Did those carry, I think those automatically carry over in water plan fund, but do we have a list of what the carryover amounts were?
Mr. Chair, Senator, you are correct. They do have the carryover balances. And I apologize for not indicating those out by line of appropriation. I don't have those on me currently, but that is something I can pull quickly, and I will distribute that to the committee.
So, Senator Titus, what page were you looking at?
I was on the budget summary document, and it is listed on page 13. So it'd be the back of the first page, fiscal year 25, summary number 2.
All right, thank you. Do you know, there are several things in the House appropriations recommendation, 800,000 for drinking water protection. I don't know what drinking water protection would entail. 3.1 million of state water plan fund for contamination remediation, What are they remediating? I see also that they have $500,000 for rural groundwater septic system and well testing. Is that by request? And if you don't have answers to these, we can ask the agency on all of these.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of these lines of appropriation are old, or excuse me, I shouldn't say old. These are the legacy lines of appropriation, and I'm looking through here. These for the Division of Environment. I don't have the breakdown of specifically what these projects, these lines of appropriation look to do. However, these are those traditional lines of appropriation. But, Mr. Chair, I can certainly get information from the agency, or again, the agency may be able to speak to that as well.
I'd ask the agency just to answer those specific questions, Mr. Drury, and I'm not sure which one of the two individuals you indicated would be the best to answer the question.
Good morning, Chairman Peck and committee members. I'm Leo Henning. I'm the Deputy Secretary and Director of Environment at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Division of Environment. Yes, sir. I'll be glad to stand for any questions.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with Senator Titus's question on the state water plan money, the 5.5. He said 5 million. It's actually 5.5 million, if I'm looking correctly. That's reappropriation.
I do not have that exact information in front of me, so I can tell you a couple of the bigger items, but I can't give you every line item that was carried over. But one of the biggest ones was the small town infrastructure. There was $3.2 million carried over there, and that money has already now been put out to the communities for their upgrades, so that will not be carried over into the next year. The other one was like a $1 to $1.5 million carryover for our RAPS program. We had a little difficulty getting farmers to implement BMPs last year for the last 2 years because of the droughts. It's hard to get cover crops planted when we're in the middle of a drought, so there wasn't a lot of uptake on a lot of those soil health initiatives. So that was one. And I believe that the Drinking Water Protection Program had a fairly large carryover. And that's a relatively new program which helps communities that are seeing nitrates increasing in their PWS wells to try to get BMPs around that source area well to reduce those nitrates before they go over the maximum contaminant level and then have to start treating their water. But those were the kind of the three big ones.
Senator Titus.
Mr. Chair, I just
finish, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to, while we're on this, would you make sure, while Mr. Drury will get us the list of those, would you make sure if any of that money's already been committed since this came out, like the small town projects, so that way we know what the real number of unspent money for next year is?
So roughly, we have been looking at that because the House is looking at our reappropriations and we are preparing for that. And right now, we think that we will have about $1 million carryover at the end of the year. So we will have gotten rid of, I hate to say gotten rid of, but have dedicated the money to those intended purposes.
So Mr. Drury indicated, I'm going to back up since you're at the mic, that the hazardous waste fund the fees are not going to be adequate.
Correct.
But you have not increased the fee. Why haven't you?
Well, we take increasing fees very seriously. We don't increase fees unless we absolutely have to. We've had some recent expenditures for salaries and market adjustments for some of our engineers and geologists that have happened in the last few years that weren't planned on, that have caused us to go to the negative side. And so we do need to raise fees to pay for salaries for staff.
But But in the meantime, you're asking for state general fund money.
Right, because we will be in the red at the end of the year if we don't receive the state general funds.
End of the current fiscal year?
The current fiscal year, and to get those new fees established through the current process, the regular, we're expecting that to take a year to a year and a half.
I had also asked about the 500,000 for rural groundwater septic system and well testing. Is that by request? In other words, if a landowner or an owner of a septic system or well wants you to come, that's the only time that you intrude onto their property?
So that program is a resurrection of a program that KDHE had numerous years ago. And that money goes out to the local county sanitarians to help individuals who have a certain level of income below poverty level, or at poverty level, to upgrade their septic systems. And there's a sliding scale as to if they're at 100% of poverty level, then and it's failing, then the local sanitarian will document that, and they will pay for the entire cost of replacing those septic systems.
How do they document that these individuals are low income? They get their tax return?
Yeah, they have to document that these are low-income residents.
And then the livestock waste management, KDA does not do anything in that arena?
No, sir.
The drinking water protection, you just indicated that there was already some money from state water plan. And then you're asking for some additional money, or at least appropriations, gave you $800,000. I'm trying to connect the dots from what you said and what this is here.
Yes, the Drinking Water Protection Program is that program which is helping small municipalities or municipalities with their drinking water wells, in which we are seeing increased nitrates in their groundwater. We track it, and we keep seeing it going up. And what we want to do is try to cut that off before it hits the drinking water standard. Because once it goes over the drinking water standard, that small community would then have to start treating that water or finding another source. And so that is very expensive. Those systems to treat the groundwater and the operation and maintenance of those is up, it's about $200 million to install a system like that. And then it's about $100,000 to $200,000 a year in maintenance. A lot of these small communities can't afford it. So what we're trying to do is be proactive, try to find the source of those nitrates around that well, and try to implement best management practices to reduce the amount of nitrogen going on in that area, or being applied to the fields in those areas. But it is a program to help the smaller communities deal with that nitrate contamination.
Do you have questions, pardon me, of Secretary Henning, Senator Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to come back to the reappropriations. You said you think that there'll be $1 million left over. Is the think based off of known, proposed, and accepted projects, or the think is you're hoping that those applications come in?
Those are things that we have very good feelings that as long as the contracts are completed in time, we will have that money spent. It does take a while, but we do feel like the $3.2 million that for the small drinking water part of it, those contracts are out. So we know that $3.2 million's gone. And the other ones are, we feel very confident that they will happen.
Okay. When it comes to the livestock waste management program, how many members of that team are there today, and how many contract engineers and contract clerical folks are there in the current program?
I'll have to give you those numbers. Okay. I don't want to speak out of turn, but our problem is we can't hire engineers typically. The state don't pay enough to hire a full-time engineer. So therefore, to keep up with the backlog, because the cattle industry and the swine industry want to continue to grow, modify permits, so to keep that backlog down, it's forcing us to contract the engineering reviews out.
And has the team assessed for opportunities to optimize efficiencies to help with that backlog? And what role do the farms have in and of themselves to help contract engineering services? Or
That's to issue a permit, we have to review the designs, make sure they're up to spec, and then, but we are as efficient, I believe, as we can be, because we get a lot of these in, and we get them out. We're holding our own with the contract engineers when our backlog has been worked down, but that's just a regulatory requirement that we review them and approve them.
And most intensive feeding operations are going to have engineers and environmental scientists design, if it's, reconfiguring a lagoon system, fixing an old lagoon system, or installing a new lagoon system or waste management system. They're typically going to have environmental scientists and engineers participate in the design of that before they turn that over to KDHE, correct?
That is correct.
And those would be stamped drawings
Yes.
and plans? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
But I will say we find many deficiencies in them, so.
Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. We started out, the committee heard a lot about the state water plan and what opportunities there might be and directions we wanted to go. And I actually appreciated trying to identify the different groups, the 5 groups that we had, resiliency or whatever. And now I understand the House committee has gone back to the legacy. How did you feel about the proposal for changing how those funds were identified and distributed?
I think it makes sense, but I also understand the legislators wanting to see exactly line by line how this money's being spent. So I understand both sides of it, which is kind of, so I would say that in the future, it makes sense to have the buckets, but I think we're going to have a few years of transition. So you can so that the legislators can kind of see how those line items fit into the buckets, and that way they are only approving the buckets going into the future. But I definitely understand the legislators' will to know exactly every line item and how much is to it. So I see both sides of it. That's not a very good answer. I'm sorry.
No. That's a good answer. I think my concern is I understand that the agencies still have the ability to move money between those buckets. And so I'm not sure how helpful that is to know line by line if we're giving them the ability to move it. Is that really giving us the assurance that we want?
Right, the visibility that you would like. I understand.
Additional questions, committee? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I'm sitting here thinking about fees and fines. So whenever you go out and do inspections and somebody's out of compliance, do you collect fines at all whenever things aren't done right?
Yes, we can issue penalties and collect fines, but I think I know most of those fines go to the state water plan. They don't go to the program.
Okay. So the history of fines in some of these 2 areas, and I'm talking livestock and those hazardous waste deals, has the fines increased or decreased here in the last 5 years?
I would say that they've stayed relatively flat. We don't issue a lot of fines. We tend to be more on the compliance side. We ask for compliance more than fines. And if we do fine a company, a lot of times we'll put that fine in abeyance, which means that here's your penalty, but if you come into compliance and stay in compliance for the next 3 years, that you don't have to pay the fine. But that's their initiative to get into compliance and stay in compliance. But I want to add that if we do collect a fine, the program doesn't get that money. It goes mostly into the state water plan.
Thank you.
Additional questions, committee? Seeing none, Director, or Deputy Secretary Henning, I appreciate you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Questions before the committee. Committee, do you have any additional questions of Mr. Drury on the Kansas Department of Health Division of Environment? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move forward then, since we have time to invest. I am hoping not to work Friday, but we shall see how things progress. We may be meeting at 8 o'clock on Friday, but we will determine that another time. Sorry, the Vice Chair and I were just having a conversation about another committee. Okay, let's look at the state fair, if you would, committee. Mr. Drury, there had been some questions that had been asked of me, and then I asked them of you, and I understand you were attempting to get an answer regarding the loan. Do you have some information on that? Is that bond callable, and where would we be as it relates to paying it off early if there would be any interest savings?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did reach out to the agency for some further clarification. The rate on that bond is approximately 2.25% to 2.5%. There are no prepayment terms, and that they may allow prepayment on that. But the agency is still checking to confirm that, but those are the numbers and the percents that I have right now.
Okay, as far as the recommendation is concerned, to get the ball started on that topic, I would suggest that our budget, not our budget, but our committee recommendation includes some type of language, and I'll let you figure out exactly how to say it to make us all look good, that we recommend paying off the bond in the event that it can be paid off early. There would be interest savings. I'm not even sure what words to use. Senator Fagg, do you have anything that you want to add on that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sitting here, I'm shocked the rate's that low. So, that's one of those kind of things. It's, in theory, I really like where that's going. But if we're talking 2.25%, 2.5%, and it's coming out of the state fair budget, isn't that right, Luke? So, that's in their budget for them to do, and then we're taking other money to pay that off. So I'd be kind of inclined to stay away from it because of the rates. That's just me.
My thought, Senator Fagg in committee, was if we pay this off, then we can eliminate any future state general fund money going in. I'm thinking specifically of the $135,000 that we appropriate. So it will be up to the will of the committee, and I understand the interest rate's much lower than I thought that it were anticipated, and that's good news. But I still think getting rid of debt, eliminating debt is a good idea, particularly because it could save us then needing to give funds to the. Did you have something to add, Mr. Drury?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize, I should have said this to begin with as well. The amount on the outstanding bond as it currently stands is just a bit over $700,000 to the tune of $717 approximately.
Committee thoughts on the recommendation of suggesting that the loan be paid off by the Ways and Means. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree that that's a good thing to do, but I think it might be a better recommendation to Ways and Means to look at this bond and all the other bonding that the state has, compare interest rates, and identify those that are could make the most difference to the state. So if we found out that this bond is 2.5% and we happen to have some that are 1.75, I'd say pay it off. If we find that we have some bonds that are at 4 or 5%, I'd much rather see the state general fund monies go there. Does that?
Understand that, but we're kind of dealing with the state fair, not all bonds at the state level.
Well, so my suggestion was to say, to Ways and Means, please look at this as you look at all the other opportunities to pay off bonds. So,
Okay, that makes a little more sense than what I heard you say the first time around. Senator Bowser, did you have something to add? Senator Titus.
I apologize if you said this, Mr. Chair, but what was the total amount the state fair is paying in debt service each year?
I did not say that, Mr. Drury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, on your budget summary document on page 26, that will show you what those estimated payments are and what they were. For FY 2025 for the current year, that's about $175,000 in principal payment and a interest payment of about $12,500. So some quick math there, about $189,000
Total debt was?
717.
Well, given that we could remove, as Senator Peck has suggested, remove the SGF subsidy by eliminating this, I would support the payoff.
And what about adding language, committee, that the Ways and Means also look at other bonding? I think that goes without saying that they can do that, but, okay, without objection, that will be the recommendation that we recommend paying off the balance due on the bond. Go ahead, Mr. Drury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I clarify for what fiscal year the committee recommendation is to pay off the debt?
Has a payment been made for 25?
Mr. Chair, I'm unsure. At this point, I'd need to follow up with the agency.
Because in round numbers, we're looking at $190,000 a year. And so if we were to pay it off in 25, I do not know. Probably 26 would be preferable, because by the time we get through all this process, we're going to easily be into mid to late April. So, okay. Is there objection to adding that language as a recommendation? Senator Fagg?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm still stuck on that rate. And I'm sitting there saying that you can go do 90-day treasury bills at 4.5% and looking at the whole picture. When we went and borrowed that money, we probably had some upfront costs that went into that. And we can't go borrow that kind of money for that kind of rate. And I'm just, I guess, I understand totally what we're trying to do, but I think when you look at that overall picture, we might be saying, oh, we're saving here, but it's going to cost us here. That's kind of my opinion of where we go with that, so.
I fully understand, Senator Fagg, what you're saying. Thinking as a banker, I think more like Dave Ramsey. Just get it out of the way, forget about it, move on with life, and sometimes we pay a stupid tax.
And we make new loans up for 4.5%.
Well, I hope we don't do that. I understand. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I understand that these bonds were used to finance capital improvements. There's a lot of buildings at the State Fair that need those investments. So I'm not sure that this, the State Fair wouldn't feel that they have to then, come up with another bonding way to get some more things done. So again, I think we'd be better with this interest rate to be helping the State Fair with another capital expense than with just removing, again, a bond that has this lower rate.
If we pay off this bond, for them to get additional bonds would require our approval, and I'm not one that ever votes for bonds, whether local or. So if there's objection, then we will vote. If there is objection to this recommendation of paying off Does someone? Okay, so there is objection, so we will vote. All in favor of this recommendation, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Motion appears to pass. Or not motion, but the recommendation does pass. So we will move on to another item, and committee, I'll certainly let you weigh in fairly quickly, but there was discussion about the Emergency Command Center. There is a $750,000 state general fund appropriation by the Appropriations Committee. We have had discussion about the fact that the fair grounds would not be the only entity that would benefit from having a command center. And so there'd been discussion of a couple things. I'll just throw them out, and then the committee can decide which way we want to go, if we want to go any direction at all. One would be to appropriate some of the funds, we'll say half for easy figuring, and then tell the fair that if they want to build this command center, they will get buy-in from local entities or other interested parties, whether it's Reno County, Hutchinson, KHP, whomever, to help pay the balance. That would be one way. Another way would be to delay this for a year while they work with other local interested parties. Thoughts, committee? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was a little unsure how much of the use this is more of a want than a need, and how much it would actually be. The way it was presented was that it would be a lot of use from outside agencies being on the edge of the fairground. And while I appreciate wanting to strengthen Reno County's emergency response, I like the idea of removing the funding and asking them to come back with a clearer proposal, so we have a better idea of what we're actually paying for.
So if they come back with the right proposal, we wouldn't pay anything. But, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So they did give us information that the total cost of the facility was about $2 million, and that this gave them the opportunity to move the Kansas Highway Patrol out of their administration building and give themselves some more opportunity there. Is this about the same amount of money that we would be using in state general funds to pay off the bonds?
It would, so the answer is yes. Mr. Drury, so the $750 that is suggested is not the full cost of the Emergency Command Center, is that correct?
Thank you, apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You are correct. The State Fair had previously been approved $250,000 from ARPA. That is not ARPA interest. The House then had the recommendation for an additional $750,000 ARPA interest, bringing that total amount to $1 million to the State Fair, with the total cost estimate being $2 million. So then the expectation from the House was that then the State Fair would work with other stakeholders to supply the other half, so that essentially through ARPA and ARPA interest, the State Fair had been given half of the cost and the other half coming from other parties.
So there's already $250,000 that has been appropriated, has been approved and appropriated.
Mr. Chair, that is correct, and that was actually through, and that there's more information on that in your, I believe in your budget summary for the State Fair. Yeah, and that's going to be on page 23. That was approved by the State Finance Council on December 21 of 2022 as a part of State Efficiency and Modernization Program.
2022, and they still haven't moved to build the...
Mr. Chair, you are correct. My understanding is that initially they thought they could rehab or repair a different sort of building on or around the State Fair. As conversations were had and speaking with other entities, that became apparent that that was not the case. And so therefore, the new estimate is that $2 million total.
Okay. Additional comments, committee? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess that I just don't really like the idea of trying to leverage the State Fair as an excuse for a law enforcement and first responder investment. I think that the community, if they think that law enforcement and first responders need some sort of central command investment, that investment be viewed differently than trying to leverage the State Fair to obtain the funds. I just think it would be a much cleaner way to look at this if they need different assets in Reno County. And I would say too, there are options to satisfy fairs and events. I understand the state fair, it's a big footprint and everything, but there are mobile command centers and things of that sort, which may already be assets of the local law enforcement agency down there. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think that I could support trying to bolt this in as part of a state fair budget if the intent is to create a first responder central command for the community.
I think the intent is to have a central command center for when the state fair is going on for security purposes. We've already appropriated $250,000 back in '22, which is not just last year and not the year before, but Centrifag.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on line with what you're thinking, what you originally stated. The part that I add to that is that local buy-in to what's that, but that's on the whole state fair deal, and there needs to be a good conversation about maybe a local sales tax or something that would go along with that, and this isn't anything that we have to decide on at this point. This could be something that I could sure hold off on.
So it's a recommendation then to delete or to not adopt the language in Senate or House substitute for 2007 as it relates to $750,000, but encourage this fair to work with local and state partners to secure remaining funding. Is that what we're looking at, committee?
I'd make a motion to that.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm not looking for motions,
Okay.
but the recommendation, and I appreciate you gentlemen stepping up. Senator Francisco.
Can you be more explicit when you say remaining funding? Are we asking them to come, the other partners to come up with the 1,750 or?
We're asking the state fair to work with local and state partners to tell us how the $2 million would, they're sitting on $250,000, the state fair is, how the other 1.75 million. So basically, we're pushing this off a year, saying, come back to us with a better proposal than what we've got right now. That's the way I would interpret it as Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd point out too, at the prior recommendation, if we pay off the bond, which eliminates that expenditure, right now they're receiving, what was it, 135,000 SGF, so they're actually going to be gaining the entirety of that 190,000 that otherwise would be going to debt service, and so that will all now be fluid funds that they can dispense at their pleasure and could potentially help participate in investments in this space.
They can tell us. So let's, Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to also, I agree with this. I also want to add, I'd be interested to see what sales tax revenues they receive within those 10 days, within as a county and as a city for having this state fair and what they could utilize locally to help fund this. Thank you.
That might be something you might want to put in there. Or we could just leave it up to the state fair to tell them, look, you're receiving some additional. We do want to address, if we get an opportunity, potential sales tax. But, okay, without objection, the recommendation would be that we do not provide the $750,000, but we ask the state fair to visit with local and state partners to secure funding for the remaining balance. And they will come back to us next year. Okay, we will move from there. I have because of the fact that the committee has determined that the majority of us would like to pay off the loan, which will free up $190,000 in payment, I'm going to recommend that we delete the $135,000 in state general fund money, and there's still going to be money ahead. 190 is higher than 135, so that would be a recommendation that we delete the state general fund money that goes to the state fair. And what we have been told is this helps offset the utility costs, and their utility costs are closer to $200,000, as I remember it correctly. I don't know if, Mr. Drury, you have the exact numbers or not. There was an email that went out from the Mr. Schultz, I believe it was, that I thought has answered some questions. But thoughts on deleting the 135 state general fund money for starting in fiscal year 2026? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If that's done, I would like it tied to paying off the bonds rather than as a separate recommendation.
The recommendation is to have it as a separate recommendation, but if the committee doesn't wish it that way, if they want to tie it to the bonds, paying off of the bond. Thoughts, committee? Otherwise, we'll move forward. Okay, the recommendation would be to delete the $135,000 of state general fund money for fiscal year 2026. Is there objection? There's objection, so we will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. One more thing that the chair had, sorry, committee, but there was discussion about the sales taxes collected, and there was also discussion about implementing, and this would take legislation, implementing a state fair sales tax that would be collected on the state fairgrounds. I don't know if we can do this or not, but it would be something that we might suggest that the legislature consider. That would be all that the recommendation would be. Reviser looks like she's thrilled about the possibility of figuring this all out. Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember my first year on the House side, this was a bill that we worked in Ag and Natural Resources budget, and I think I carried it on the floor. So I thought it already was in statute, but I guess it didn't make it all the way through.
So you're saying there was legislation back a few years ago?
In 17 or 18, to all sales tax collected at the state fair will go to the state fair for that 10-day period, and it was to help with the transfer that they were never receiving from the state that they were supposed to be receiving that for 10 years they never received. So it was to stop the transfer.
Let's stretch your memory. Do you remember the bill number? Okay, you don't.
No.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, it was when Representative Schroeder was the chair of the committee, and it would have been in 17 or 18.
And you think that did pass the House?
I remember it passed the House. I thought it became law.
Okay, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that did become law. But that was the sales tax that was collected from sales at the fair itself. So I think Senator Fagg was talking about, were there other sales tax increases in the city and the county apart from the fair itself? And I would also say, certainly, the city and the county have some more expenses in terms of law enforcement and road upkeep and things during those 10 days. But I understood Senator Fagg to be addressing the sales tax in general collected by the city, not the sales tax collected by the fair sales.
My understanding as well, Senator Francisco, of Senator Fagg's suggestion, and I am hearing from staff that that did become law, Senator Blue, and I'm asking how much money that brings in approximately. Do either one of you know, Mr. Drury?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's about $350,000 per year estimate. And then the liquor tax as well would be added on top of that. It's about $70,000 as well retained by the state fair every year estimate.
So there was a significant increase in funding to the state fair a few years ago. Okay. So then there's no need to suggest they have a sales tax unless we're going to do what Senator Fagg has suggested or recommended. Did you have a recommendation, Senator Fagg?
The only thing I'd add to that is that that's just on the fairgrounds. So I'm saying it would be interesting to look at the city of Hutch or Reno County, you know, for that short period of time. They get a lot of sales tax and stuff, but they do have a lot of expenses, like Senator Francisco says too. So I'm just thinking that, yeah, we need to consider expanding that for them to look into that and what kind of number that'd be and thought processes on the local level with something like that. I want to see what buy-in the city has and the county has with us having the state fair there.
That I would hope would be part of the discussion as far as the command center, that the local units of government are benefiting from the state fair when sales tax revenue. I do not know, do you know, Mr. Drury? And we can find out from our tax analyst what the tax rate is in Reno County or in the city of Hutchinson?
Mr. Chair, I do not know that answer.
Okay. Senator Fagg.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure that we could work a 10-day deal, or, you know, they have a holiday tax deal for sales tax in Oklahoma, you know, for buying kids' clothes and stuff. So there's some way that can be done, I would think. Thank you.
I don't know how they would determine that because they pay their sales tax on a monthly basis versus daily. But I don't know that we necessarily want to make that a part of the committee recommendation unless someone has some good wording. Senator Francisco.
I just wanted to comment really quickly that the bill for the sales tax on items at the fair was to replace the annual appropriation that was made for capital improvements at the fair. So they didn't come out necessarily ahead. It was one of the things like you're trying to do in terms of the bonding. They eliminated that annual transfer.
Is there anything additional you want to make a part of the committee recommendation for the state fair from this committee to the full Ways and Means? All right, seeing none, that will be our recommendations. And if you think of something additional, let me know as chair, because I will be glad to tell the Ways and Means Committee that after the fact, Senator Y came up with a great idea that I hadn't been made aware of previously,